The pickup truck's engine rattled to a stop beside the metal scrap pile. Cass Briggs killed the headlights and sat in the darkness for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. The Scranton City dump stretched before him like a graveyard of broken dreams. Rusted car parts, twisted steel beams, and discarded machinery created jagged silhouettes against the gray October sky. The cold bit through his worn flannel shirt as he climbed out. 11:30 at night, and he was still hauling scrap from the auto shop. This was his life now: work until his hands bled, then work some more. Anything to keep his mind off the emptiness that had swallowed him whole since Cody died. He grabbed the first piece of twisted metal and hurled it toward the pile. The crash echoed across the empty lot. He worked methodically, muscles straining under his shirt. Each piece of scrap hit the pile with violent precision. The physical pain felt good. It was something real, something he could control. That a rustling sound made him freeze. Cass straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. The sound came again, deliberate movement, not wind. He listened, scanning the maze of discarded metal. Probably a rat or a stray cat. The dump attracted all kinds of scavengers. He grabbed a wrench from his toolbox and moved toward the sound. Come on out. I ain't got all night. The rustling stopped. Cass stepped around a twisted car frame and peered into the shadows between two stacks of rusted pipes. His breath caught in his throat. That a small figure huddled in the narrow space, pressed against the cold metal like she was trying to disappear. A child. A little girl with tangled blonde hair that might have been clean once, weeks ago. Dirt streaked her pale cheeks, and her wide blue eyes stared up at him with the kind of terror that came from too much pain and not enough kindness. She clutched a piece of moldy bread in her tiny hands. Half of it was already gone. Jesus, Cass whispered. He dropped the wrench and raised his hands slowly, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. Hey there, sweetheart. I'm not going to hurt you. The girl pressed herself deeper into the shadows. Her feet were bare, covered in cuts and grime that looked infected. She wore a torn pink dress that hung loose on her thin frame. Purple bruises dotted her arms like fingerprints. What's your name? Cass asked, crouching down to her level. The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. She took another bite of the moldy bread, chewing slowly like it was the most precious thing in the world. It's okay, he said, keeping his voice soft. I'm Cass. What's your name? Annika, she whispered. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. He stared at her face, really looked at it for the first time. The shape of her eyes, almond-shaped, tilted slightly upward at the corners. The stubborn set of her jaw. The way her blonde hair curled at the ends, even matted and dirty as it was. She looked exactly like Cody. Not similar. Not reminiscent. Exactly. Like someone had taken his brother's face and shrunk it down to fit a 6-year-old girl. The resemblance was so strong it made his chest tight. Where's your family? Cass asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Annika's lower lip trembled. She looked down at the bread in her hands, then back up at him. She said, I'm not real. The words sent ice through Cass's veins. He studied the child's face again, searching for any detail that might prove him wrong. But the resemblance was unmistakable. This girl could have been Cody's twin, just smaller and younger and broken in ways that made Cass want to find whoever had hurt her and make them pay. Who said you're not real? Cass asked. Annika shook her head and took another bite of the moldy bread. Her stomach made a loud, growling sound that echoed off the metal around them. When's the last time you ate something good? He asked. She shrugged, the movement so small it was barely visible. Don't remember. Where have you been sleeping? Here. Sometimes the car placed down the road when the man's not there. Cass's hands clenched into fists. Someone had thrown this child away like garbage. Left her to starve in a dump, to sleep rough and eat moldy food. The thought made his blood boil, but he kept his voice calm. You want to come with me? He asked. I got food at my place. Real food. Hot food. Annika studied his face with those familiar blue eyes. She was weighing her options, trying to decide if he was safe or just another person who had hurt her. The fact that a 6-year-old had to make that calculation made Cass sick. You won't hurt me? She asked. Never, Cass said. I promise. She nodded slowly and reached out her hand. Her fingers were ice cold and so thin he could feel every bone. He helped her to her feet, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle her. As they walked to the truck, Cass's mind raced. 6 years ago, Raina had been pregnant when Cody died. She'd claimed it was a miscarriage after the accident. But what if she'd lied? What if this child was proof that everything Raina had told them was a lie? He buckled Annika into the passenger seat and started the engine. The heater kicked in, and she held her hands in front of the vents, soaking up the warmth. She didn't speak during the short drive to his apartment above the auto shop, just stared out the window like she was memorizing the route in case she needed to run. Cass carried her upstairs to his small kitchen. He heated up a can of soup and made her a grilled cheese sandwich, watching as she ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd learned not to waste food. She finished everything he put in front of her, then asked for more. "How long since you had a real meal?" he asked. "Long time," she said, taking another spoonful of soup. "Where were you before the dump?" Annika's face went blank. "Don't remember." But her eyes said she remembered everything. She just wasn't ready to trust him with it yet. After she ate, Cass ran a bath and found some old clothes that would fit her. While she cleaned up, he sat in his kitchen and tried to process what he'd found. This wasn't some random abandoned child. This was family. This was Cody's daughter, thrown away like trash by the woman who'd claimed to love him. Tomorrow, he'd start asking questions. Tonight, he'd make sure this little girl got a hot meal and a safe place to sleep. But deep down, Cass already knew the truth. And somebody was going to pay for what they'd done to her. The Ellison mansion sat on the hill like a monument to greed, its white columns gleaming in the afternoon sun. Cass parked his battered pickup between a Mercedes and a BMW, feeling out of place among the luxury cars. The curved driveway was made of imported stone that probably cost more than most people made in a year. He walked up to the front door, his work boots loud against the polished steps. Through the glass panels beside the door, he could see marble floors that stretched back into shadows, crystal chandeliers hanging from high ceilings like frozen fireworks. Everything Raina had always wanted. The doorbell chimed with multiple notes like church bells. Cass waited, running through what he planned to say. He needed to be careful here. Push too hard and Raina would lawyer up. Not hard enough, and she'd think she could brush him off. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 30s. Blonde hair pulled back in a perfect style that probably took an hour to achieve. She wore clothes that cost more than most people made in a month, a silk blouse and tailored pants that screamed money. Raina Elwood Ellison looked like she'd stepped out of magazines spread about successful women. But when she saw Cass, her carefully practiced smile faltered for just a moment, long enough for him to see the fear underneath. "Cass," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "What a surprise." "We need to talk," he said. Raina glanced over her shoulder into the house, then stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "Tobias is in a meeting with some investors. This isn't really a good time. It's about a little girl I found last night." Something flickered in Raina's eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. 6 years old. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. Looks exactly like Cody. Raina's face went pale, but she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "Cass, you're not thinking clearly. Grief can make people see things that aren't there. Her name's Annika." "I don't know any Annika." Raina's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. She clasped them behind her back to hide it. "We only have boys now, Cass. You must be mistaken." Cass stepped closer, close enough to smell her expensive perfume. "Funny thing about that. I remember you being pregnant when Cody died. You said it was a miscarriage, but I'm starting to think that was a lie. How dare you?" Raina's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and vicious underneath. "I lost my baby the same week I lost my husband. Don't you think I've suffered enough? Show me the medical records." "What? If you had a miscarriage, there'd be records. Hospital paperwork. Doctor's notes. Show me." Raina straightened her shoulders. "I don't have to prove anything to you. And I don't appreciate you coming to my home and making accusations. Where were you last night between 10 and midnight?" "With my husband. In our bed. Where married people belong." She turned toward the door, her movements sharp with anger. "I think you should leave." "This isn't over," Cass said. Raina paused with her hand on the doorknob. When she turned back, her face was calm again, but her eyes were cold as winter. "Yes, it is," she said. Cody's dead, Cass. He's been dead for 6 years. Whatever you think you saw, whatever fantasy you've cooked up in that broken mind of yours, ends here. If you continue to harass me, I'll call the police. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the glass panels. Cass stood on the steps for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Raina was lying. He'd seen it in her eyes, heard it in her voice. The question was how to prove it, that he walked back to his truck, his mind already working. Raina might have fooled everyone else 6 years ago, but she'd made a mistake. She'd left Annika alive, and that mistake was going to cost her everything as he drove away. Cass caught a glimpse of movement in an upstairs window. Someone watching him leave. He couldn't make out the face, but he bet money it was Tobias Ellison, wondering what Cass knew and how much trouble it might cause. Good. Let them wonder. Let them worry. By the time he was done, they'd have a lot more to worry about than one unwelcome visitor. The diner smelled like coffee and grease, the kind of place where truckers and night shift workers came to fuel up before facing another day. Cass slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from Nicolette Harmon and waited while she finished reading a case file. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on her tired face. Nix looked older than her 35 years, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes wrinkled from too many long days and not enough sleep. She'd been suspended from social services for 3 months now, ever since she'd blown the whistle on a judge who was taking bribes to keep kids in foster care longer than necessary. "Thanks for meeting me," Cass said. Nix closed the file and looked up. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her hands shook slightly as she reached for her coffee. "You said it was about a kid. I don't do kids anymore, remember? I'm suspended pending investigation. That's why I came to you. I need someone who knows the system but doesn't answer to it." The waitress brought coffee without being asked, a tired-looking woman who'd probably been working this shift for 20 years. Nix wrapped her hands around the mug and waited. "I found a little girl in the dump last night," Cass said. 6 years old. Says her name's Annika, and I think she's my brother's daughter." Nix raised an eyebrow. "Your brother who died 6 years ago?" Raina was pregnant when Cody died. She claimed it was a miscarriage, but this girl looks exactly like him. Exactly. Even if that's true, what do you want me to do about it? I'm not exactly in a position to help anyone right now. Cass leaned forward. "I need you to check records. Hospital births, CPS files, anything you can find. If Raina had a baby 6 years ago, there should be a paper trail." Nick sipped her coffee and studied his face. "And if there isn't, then we'll know she's been lying. Cass, I can't just go digging through confidential files. I'm already in enough trouble. If they catch me accessing records without authorization, I'll lose my license permanently. A little girl was abandoned in a dump. Nix. Someone threw her away like garbage. If that doesn't deserve breaking a few rules, what does?" Nix was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee like it might hold answers. When she looked up, her expression had changed. "Tell me about the girl," she said. "What condition was she in? Malnourished? Bruised? Terrified?" "She was eating moldy bread when I found her, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real meal. Medical attention. I took her to Doc Martinez. Nothing life-threatening, but she's been neglected for a long time. Probably months. Maybe longer. Signs of abuse. Physical, yeah. Emotional, too. She flinches when you move too fast. Doesn't make eye contact unless you get down to her level. Someone's been hurting her." Nix nodded slowly. "What about sexual abuse?" Doc said no signs of that, thank God. "But Nix, this kid is traumatized. Really traumatized. She barely speaks above a whisper." "Okay," Nix said finally. "I'll make some calls. But this stays between us. If anyone asks, we never had this conversation." "Agreed. Give me 24 hours. The next evening, Nix called with news. They met at the same diner, but this time her expression was grim. She carried a manila folder thick with papers. "I checked everything," she said, sliding the folder across the table. "Hospital records, birth certificates, CPS files. There's no record of Raina Elwood giving birth to a daughter 6 years ago." Cass opened the folder and scanned the papers. Official documents, computer printouts, photocopied forms. All of them blank, where information about a daughter should have been. "What about the miscarriage?" he asked. "No record of that either. No hospital admission, No emergency room visit. No doctor's report. According to official records, Raina Elwood was never pregnant 6 years ago. So she lied. It looks that way. But Cass, this gets worse. I found something else. Nix pulled out another set of papers. I checked with the private practices too. Raina was seeing an OBGYN named Dr. Patricia Voss. But here's the thing, Dr. Voss died in a car accident 3 years ago. Her practice was sold, and all the patient files were supposed to be transferred to the new owner. Supposed to be, the files for several patients went missing during the transfer, including Raina's. The new practice claims they never received them, and the moving company says they delivered everything. Cass felt his jaw tighten. That's convenient. Too convenient. But I did find this. Nix handed him a photocopy of a prescription pad. Dr. Voss prescribed prenatal vitamins to Raina Elwood dated 8 months before Cody's death. High-dose vitamins, the kind they give to women with complicated pregnancies. So she was definitely pregnant. Full term, from the looks of it. The last prescription was dated 3 days before Cody died. After that, nothing. Cass stared at the prescription. The evidence was clear now. Raina had carried a baby to full term, then made that baby disappear. The question was why. There's something else, Nix said. I talked to a friend who works at social services in Philadelphia. She remembered a case from 6 years ago. Someone called in a tip about a newborn being sold on the black market. The caller claimed it was the baby of a prominent family in Pennsylvania. Did they investigate? They tried, but the tip was anonymous and they couldn't find any evidence. The caller said the baby was being sold to cover up an affair, but wouldn't give details. The case was closed after 2 weeks. What happened to the baby? Nobody knows. The assumption was that if it really happened, the baby was probably sold to a family out of state. Maybe out of the country. Cass closed the folder. If they didn't kill her, they dumped her. It was cleaner than abortion, especially for a family like the Ellisons. That's what I'm thinking too, Nix said. The question is, where has she been for 6 years? Foster care, maybe, or worse. Cass's hands clenched around his coffee mug. Someone's been taking care of her, but not well. She's traumatized, Nix. Really traumatized. We need more evidence before we can do anything official. What you have now is circumstantial. Then we get more evidence. Nix leaned back in the booth. Cass, be careful. The Ellisons have money and connections. They own judges, cops, city councilmen. If they're willing to abandon a child, they're capable of a lot worse. Let them try, Cass said. I've got nothing left to lose. What about the girl? You've got her to think about now. Cass thought about Annika, asleep in his apartment above the shop. She'd had another nightmare last night, waking up screaming about someone coming to take her away. He'd sat with her until she fell back asleep, promising her over and over that she was safe. That's exactly why I'm doing this, he said. She deserves to know the truth about who she is. And the people who threw her away deserve to pay for what they did. Nix nodded slowly. Okay, but we do this smart. We build a case that can't be torn apart by expensive lawyers. What do you need from me? Everything. Every detail about where you found her, what condition she was in, what she's told you. And we need to find out where she's been for 6 years. How do we do that? Foster care records are sealed, but there are ways around that. If she was in the system, there'll be traces. Medical records, school enrollment, things like that. And if she wasn't in the system, then we find out who had her, and we make them talk. Cass's auto shop sat at the edge of downtown Scranton, wedged between a pawn shop and a vacant lot where a factory used to stand. The building was old brick, stained with decades of oil and rust, but it was solid. More importantly, it was his. Nobody could take away from him, and nobody could tell him what to do inside it. He'd installed security cameras the day after bringing Annika home. For cameras covering every angle of the shop and the small apartment above it. Motion sensors on the doors and windows. An alarm system connected directly to his phone. Anyone who wanted to get to the girl would have to go through him first. Annika sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, watching him work on a transmission. She'd been with him for a week now, and she was starting to talk more. Small words at first, then sentences. She was smart, maybe too smart for her own good. She noticed things, remembered details, asked questions that showed she was thinking 3 steps ahead. Why do you fix cars? She asked, handing him a wrench. Cass looked up from the transmission. Oil stained his hands black, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold October air. Because when something's broken, you don't throw it away. You fix it. What if it's too broken? Nothing's too broken if you know what you're doing and you're willing to work hard enough. Annika considered this, her small face serious. Someone tried to throw me away. The wrench slipped in Cass's hand, scraping his knuckles. Blood welled up from the cut, but he ignored it. Yeah, they did. But they made a mistake. What mistake? They left you alive, and they underestimated what I'd do to protect you. The bell above the shop door chimed. Aubrey Cantrell walked in, carrying a bag of groceries and wearing her bartender uniform black pants and a white shirt that had seen better days. She looked older than her 28 years, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when she was dating Cody in high school. Hey, she said to Cass, then smiled at Annika. And hello there, sweetheart. Annika shrank back behind a toolbox, peering around the edge like a scared animal. It's okay, Cass said gently. This is Aubrey. She's a friend. She knew your dad. Annika's eyes widened. You knew my dad? Aubrey knelt down slowly, keeping her distance so she wouldn't spook the girl. I did. He was a good man, kind and funny and stubborn as a mule when he thought he was right. What did he look like? Like you. Aubrey said softly. He had the same eyes, the same smile. He would have loved you so much. Annika stepped out from behind the toolbox. Do you have pictures? I do. Would you like to see them sometime? Annika nodded eagerly, the first real enthusiasm Cass had seen from her. I brought some things I thought you might like, Aubrey continued, setting the bag on the workbench. Chocolate milk and cookies, and some new clothes that should fit you better. Annika's eyes lit up at the mention of chocolate milk. She was still too thin, too small for her age, but she was gaining weight. Doc Martinez had said she was probably 6 months behind where she should be developmentally, likely from malnutrition and stress. She doesn't trust easy, Cass explained. Smart girl. Aubrey stood up slowly. Mind if we talk outside? They stepped into the alley behind the shop. Aubrey lit a cigarette and leaned against the brick wall, her hands shaking slightly. Jesus, Cass. She looks exactly like him. It's like seeing a ghost. I know. What are you going to do? Prove she's his daughter. Then make Raina pay for what she did. Aubrey took a long drag, the smoke curling up into the gray sky. You think Raina really tried to get rid of her? I know she did. The question is how and why. The why's easy. Tobias Ellison wouldn't want to raise another man's kid. Especially not Cody's kid. He hated your brother. What? Jealousy. Raina was with Cody first, and everyone knew she never really got over him. Even when she was engaged to Tobias, she still talked about Cody all the time. Cass felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. She killed him. I think so. And then she got rid of the baby so she could start fresh with Tobias. You said you'd help. What did you mean? Aubrey flicked her cigarette into the alley. I've got pictures from when we were all together. High school, college, even some from when Cody and Raina were dating. Including some from right before he died. Pictures of what? Her. Pregnant. Really pregnant. Like she was ready to pop any day. Can you give me copies? Already made them. Aubrey handed him a flash drive. There's about 50 photos on there, covering 6 months before Cody died. And Cass. In the last few photos, she doesn't look happy to be pregnant. She looks angry. Angry how? Like the baby was ruining her life. Like she resented it for existing. That evening, V. Talbot knocked on the shop door. Cass let him in, checking the street before closing the door behind him. V was in his 70s, gray-haired and thick around the middle, but his eyes were sharp as ever and his hands were still steady. He taught Cass everything he knew about welding and metalwork. Heard you found something interesting, V said, looking around the shop. Word travels fast. In this town? Faster than you think. Half the neighborhood's talking about the little girl you brought home. What are they saying? That she's lucky you found her. That someone needs to find out who threw her away and make them pay. V's expression hardened. I agree with that sentiment. Where's she? Upstairs, sleeping. Had nightmares again last night. Someone really hurt her, V. V nodded grimly. Poor kid. What's the plan? Build a case. Get custody. Make sure she's safe. And Raina's going to prison. The Ellisons won't go down easy. They own half this town, and they've got enough money to buy the other half. Then we'll have to be smarter than them. V pulled out a folder. I brought you something. Remember when I got fired for blowing the whistle on the illegal layoffs? Yeah, 3 years ago. I kept copies of everything, including some interesting personnel files and internal memos. V opened the folder. Turns out Tobias Ellison has a history of making problems disappear. Workers who complain too much. Union organizers. Whistleblowers like me. Cass studied the papers. Names, dates, documentation of harassment and intimidation. How does he make them disappear? Bribes, threats, blackmail. Whatever it takes. He's got judges in his pocket, cops on his payroll. The man's basically untouchable. Nobody's untouchable. Maybe not, but he's close. V closed the folder. You sure you want to go up against him? I don't have a choice. That little girl upstairs is family. She's all I have left of Cody. Then we better be real careful. And real smart. The next morning, Aubrey arrived with coffee and news. She'd been asking questions at the bar where she worked, listening to conversations, piecing together fragments of gossip from 6 years ago. The kind of details that people remembered but never reported to the police. I remembered something, she said, sitting across from Cass in the shop's small office. The night before Cody died, he came to the bar. He was agitated, scared about something. Scared of what? He said Raina was acting strange, talking about getting rid of the baby. He thought she meant adoption at first, but then she started talking about other options. Cass felt his chest tighten. What kind of options? That's what freaked him out. She wouldn't say exactly, just kept talking about how the baby would ruin their future. How Tobias would never accept another man's child. Did Cody say anything else? He was going to confront her the next day, demand that she keep the baby, or he'd fight for custody himself. Aubrey's voice dropped. That was the day he died. The hunting accident. That's what they called it. But Cass, Cody didn't hunt. He hated guns. Always said they were for cowards who couldn't face their problems like men. The pieces clicked together in Cass's mind. They killed him. I think so. And then they got rid of the baby. Except they didn't get rid of her. Someone's been taking care of her all these years. Foster care, maybe, or something worse. Cass stood up and paced to the window. Outside, Annika was sitting on the fire escape, reading a book Aubrey had brought her. She looked so small and fragile, like a strong wind could blow her away. We need more evidence. Medical records, witness statements, anything that proves Raina had a baby. I might be able to help with that. Aubrey pulled out her phone. I've got pictures from high school, college, even some from when Cody and Raina were dating, including some from right before he died. She scrolled through the photos, then stopped on one. There, look at this. The photo showed Raina at a graduation party, wearing a loose dress that couldn't quite hide her pregnant belly. She was holding a beer, but not drinking it, one hand resting on her stomach. The timestamp read 3 weeks before Cody's death. She was definitely pregnant, Aubrey said, and pretty far along. Can you print these? Already did. Aubrey handed him a manila envelope. There's about 30 photos in there, all showing her pregnant over a 6-month period. What about the death report? V's working on that. He's got a friend who used to work for the Park Service. That afternoon, V returned with more disturbing news. He'd gotten a copy of the official death report from the park ranger who'd found Cody's body, along with the police investigation file. Here's what doesn't make sense, V said, spreading the papers on the workbench. The report says Cody's body was found face down in a dry creek bed. Blunt force trauma to the back of the head. So, the area where they found him is rocky and flat. No trees big enough to climb, no cliffs, nothing he could have fallen from. And the creek bed had been dry for months. Cass studied the photographs attached to the report. Crime scene photos showing Cody's body lying in a shallow depression surrounded by rocks and scrub brush. So how did he get blunt force trauma? Someone hit him with something. The coroner estimated the object was round and heavy, like a tire iron or a baseball bat. Murder weapon, never found. The case was closed after 48 hours when the coroner ruled it an accidental death. 48 hours. Cass looked up sharply. That's not nearly enough time for a proper investigation. Not unless someone wanted it closed fast. V pulled out another paper. And look at this. The life insurance policy. Cass read the document. His hands tightened on the paper as he absorbed the details. He changed it 10 days before he died. Made Raina the sole beneficiary. For $500,000. She killed him for money. Her and Tobias together, I'd bet. Killing Cody solved multiple problems. They got the insurance money, and they got rid of the only person who could stop them from abandoning the baby. Cass felt rage building in his chest like a fire. Raina had murdered his brother and thrown away his child for money and convenience. She'd spent 6 years living in luxury, while Annika suffered. "We need that DNA test," he said. "I can arrange that," Aubrey said, quietly. "I know a lab that does paternity tests, no questions asked, and we need to find out where Annika's been for 6 years. Someone was supposed to be taking care of her, but she was malnourished and traumatized when I found her. Foster care records are sealed," V said. "Then we'll have to get creative." 2 days later, Aubrey returned with the DNA results. She found Cass in the shop, teaching Annika how to use a socket wrench to remove lug nuts from a tire. "Like this?" Annika asked, her small hands gripping the wrench. "Perfect," Cass said. "You're a natural." Aubrey waited until Annika was distracted by the project before handing Cass the envelope. He opened it and read the results, his jaw tightening with each line. 99.9% probability that Cody Briggs is the biological father, he read aloud. "So now we know for sure," Aubrey said. "Now we prove it in court." Maribel Chase looked like someone who'd spent her career fighting losing battles. She was in her 50s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with the tired expression of someone who'd seen too much corruption and not enough justice. Her office in the state building was small and cluttered, stacks of case files covering every surface. She sat across from Cass, studying the evidence he'd compiled. The DNA test results showing Annika was Cody's daughter. The photos proving Raina had been pregnant. The suspicious circumstances of Cody's death. The missing medical records and forged documents. "This is good work," Maribel said finally. "But it's not enough for criminal charges. What about child abandonment? You'd have to prove Raina was the one who abandoned the girl. Right now, you can prove she gave birth 6 years ago, but you can't prove what happened after that. So we need more evidence. A lot more. And even then, the Ellisons have enough money to buy their way out of most charges. Not all charges." Maribel looked up sharply. "What do you mean? If we can prove they murdered Cody, that's different. Money can't buy your way out of murder. You think you can prove that? I think I can make them prove it themselves." Maribel closed the file. "What do you need from me?" "Emergency protective custody for Annika, and an investigation into the Ellison family. I can file the paperwork for emergency custody. The DNA test and evidence of abandonment should be enough for that. But I'll need more evidence before I can open a formal investigation. Give me a week." "You got it. But Cass, be careful. If the Ellisons are willing to kill once, they'll do it again. Let them try." 3 days later, Cass's plan went into motion. Aubrey had discovered that Raina volunteered at a children's charity every Tuesday morning, handling phone calls and organizing fundraising events. She'd be alone in the charity office from 9 to 11, with minimal security and no witnesses. Cass arrived at 10:30, carrying a manila envelope and wearing his best clothes, clean jeans, and a button-down shirt that didn't have oil stains. The charity office was in an upscale shopping center, all glass windows and expensive furniture designed to impress donors. Raina sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars, wearing a tailored suit and a fake smile for the photographer taking pictures for the charity's newsletter. She looked like the perfect society wife, beautiful and generous and completely devoted to helping children. The irony made Cass sick. She saw him through the window, and her smile faltered. She said something to the photographer, who packed up his equipment and left quickly. Cass walked in and closed the door behind him. "You have some nerve coming here," Raina said, standing up behind her desk. "We need to talk. I thought I made myself clear the other day. There's nothing to discuss." Cass placed the envelope on her desk. DNA test results. Annika is Cody's daughter. Raina's face went white, but her voice stayed steady. "I don't know who this Annika is, but she's not my child. 99.9% match to Cody's DNA. I had it done by an independent lab, using samples from his personal effects. DNA can be faked. So can miscarriages. Cass opened the envelope and spread out the photos. Funny thing about digital cameras. They timestamp everything. Raina stared at the photos of herself, clearly pregnant, dated just weeks before Cody's death. Her hands trembled as she picked up one of the pictures. "These prove nothing," she said. "They prove you lied about the miscarriage. And if you lied about that, what else did you lie about? I want you to leave. Where has she been for 6 years? Raina? Who's been taking care of her? I don't know what you're talking about. Someone abandoned that little girl in a dump. Left her to starve. She was eating moldy bread when I found her, covered in bruises, terrified of everything." Something flickered in Raina's eyes. For just a moment, Cass saw what might have been guilt. Or maybe it was satisfaction. "That's terrible," she said. "But it has nothing to do with me. State Children's Services is opening an investigation. They'll be asking questions about your pregnancy 6 years ago, about the missing medical records, about the forged miscarriage documents. Let them ask. I have nothing to hide. We'll see about that." Cass gathered up the photos. By the way, they're also reopening Cody's death investigation. Turns out there were some irregularities in the original report. For the first time, Raina looked genuinely scared. Her face went pale, and her hands shook as she gripped the edge of the desk. "You can't do that. Already done. Federal agents will be interviewing everyone who was close to Cody before he died, including you. You bastard. Careful, Raina. That anger might make you say something you'll regret." Cass walked to the door, then turned back. "One more thing. The insurance company is also looking into Cody's policy. $500,000 is a lot of money. Makes people do crazy things." He left Raina sitting behind her desk, staring at the empty envelope with fear and rage warring in her eyes. 2 hours later, Maribel Chase arrived at the Ellison mansion with a court order and 2 state police officers. They found Raina packing suitcases, her hands shaking as she threw clothes into bags. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Reporters filled the back rows, their cameras and notebooks ready to capture every moment of what the local paper had dubbed the trial of the century. Curious locals who'd been following the case occupied the middle seats, while lawyers and law enforcement officials claimed spots near the front. Cass sat in the first row behind the prosecution table, watching as Raina's high-priced legal team argued for dismissal of all charges. For lawyers in expensive suits, led by a sharp-faced man named Harrison Blackwood, who specialized in defending wealthy clients accused of serious crimes, Raina herself looked perfect as always. She wore a conservative navy suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, her hair styled in a way that suggested both professionalism and vulnerability. She played the role of grieving widow and wrongfully accused mother with the skill of a seasoned actress, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue whenever the cameras focused on her. Blackwood was making his opening statement, his voice confident and commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client is the victim of a malicious campaign of harassment by her deceased husband's unstable brother. The so-called evidence you'll hear today is based on coincidence, hearsay, and the desperate fantasies of a man who cannot accept that his brother is dead." Cass wanted to stand up and punch the lawyer in his smug face, but he stayed seated, his hands clenched in his lap. Beside him, Annika sat quietly, coloring in a book. She was too young to understand what was happening, but she sensed the tension in the room. "The prosecution will try to convince you that Mrs. Ellison abandoned a child 6 years ago," Blackwood continued. "But they cannot prove this child is hers. They will show you photographs and DNA tests, but these prove nothing except that a desperate man will go to any lengths to destroy an innocent woman's reputation." The prosecutor, a young woman named Janet Walsh, stood to make her opening statement. She was in her early 30s, ambitious and idealistic, the kind of lawyer who took cases like this because she believed in justice rather than money. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about greed, murder, and the abandonment of an innocent child. The evidence will show that Raina Ellison gave birth to a daughter 6 years ago, then conspired with her current husband to abandon that child and murder the child's father for insurance money. Walsh moved to stand in front of the jury box, her voice clear and steady. You will hear testimony from medical professionals who treated Mrs. Ellison during her pregnancy. You will see photographs that document her condition right up until the day her former husband died. You will learn about forged medical records and missing files that were designed to cover up the birth of an unwanted child. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Cass testified about finding Annika in the dump, describing the condition she was in and the resemblance to his dead brother. Aubrey presented the photographs and testified about Cody's fears in the days before his death. V explained the irregularities in the death investigation and the suspicious timing of the insurance policy change. But the most damaging testimony came from sources Cass hadn't expected. Dr. Patricia Voss's former nurse, Elena Rodriguez, took the stand on day 8 of the trial. She was a small woman in her 40s with nervous eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years working in medical clinics. Mrs. Ellison asked me several times about off-the-books deliveries, Elena testified, her voice barely above a whisper. Can you explain what you mean by off-the-books deliveries? Janet Walsh asked. Births that wouldn't be officially recorded. No birth certificate, no hospital records, nothing that could be traced back to the mother. And what did you tell Mrs. Ellison? I told her it was illegal. She said she didn't care about legal. She just needed to know if it was possible. Did she say why she wanted an off-the-books delivery? Elena's hands shook as she gripped the witness stand. She said her fiancé couldn't know about the baby. She said it would ruin everything, that he'd never marry her if he knew she was carrying another man's child. What was your response? I told her I couldn't help her with something like that. She got angry, said I didn't understand what was at stake. On day 10, Maribel Chase presented evidence of forged miscarriage paperwork. Documents that claimed Raina had lost the baby were dated after the baby's actual birth, and the signatures didn't match Dr. Voss's handwriting or medical license number. These documents were created to provide cover for the defendant's story, Maribel testified. They were backdated and filed with the insurance company to support her claim that she had suffered a miscarriage. But the most shocking moment came on day 12. Janet Walsh stood before the jury, holding a small digital recorder that looked like it had been through hell. The plastic case was cracked and the metal was corroded, but the device still worked. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to play a voicemail message that was found on the defendant's phone 6 years ago. The message was from Cody Briggs, recorded the night before his death. Blackwood jumped to his feet. Objection. This so-called evidence was recovered under questionable circumstances. Your Honor, Walsh said, the message was recovered from the defendant's own phone by a digital forensics expert hired by the family. The phone was given to Mr. Briggs by his brother's estate. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said, but the jury should consider the source and circumstances of this evidence. The courtroom went silent as Walsh pressed play. Static filled the room for a moment. Then Cass heard his brother's voice for the first time in 6 years. Raina, it's me. I know you're not answering my calls, but I need to say this in case something happens. If anything happens to me tomorrow, it's not the woods. It's not an accident. It's Raina, and I think she's got Tobias involved. Cass felt tears burning his eyes. Beside him, Annika looked up from her coloring book, sensing something important was happening. Cody's voice continued. She's been talking about getting rid of the baby, and when I told her I'd fight for custody, she got this look in her eyes. Cold, like she was already making plans. I'm scared, Raina. Not of you, but for you. Don't do something you can't take back. This baby is innocent. She doesn't deserve to pay for our mistakes. The message ended with a soft click. The courtroom was dead silent. That Raina's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. This message is clearly fabricated. My client would never. Your Honor, Janet Walsh said calmly. The message was recovered from the defendant's own phone by a certified digital forensics expert. The metadata confirms it was recorded at 11:15 p.m. on October 15th, the night before Mr. Briggs's death. I'll allow it to stand, Judge Morrison said. Cass watched Raina's face as the message played. For just a moment, her mask slipped completely. He saw the real woman underneath, cold, calculating, and completely without remorse. She wasn't grieving for Cody or feeling guilt about Annika. She was angry that her perfect plan had fallen apart. 2 days later, the jury returned with their verdict after deliberating for 6 hours. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of child abandonment with intent to cause serious bodily harm, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of perjury, we find the defendant guilty. Raina showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but Cass saw her hands shaking as the bailiff led her away in handcuffs. The federal courthouse was smaller than the county court, but the atmosphere was just as tense. Tobias Ellison sat at the defendant's table, his expensive suit unable to hide the fear in his eyes. He'd lost weight during the weeks since his wife's conviction, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. The federal charges were more serious: racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of civil rights under the Federal Child Protection Act. The FBI had been building a case against the Ellison family for years, and Annika's case had given them the evidence they needed to bring down the entire operation. FBI agent Sarah Mitchell presented the government's case with clinical precision. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, the kind of federal agent who'd spent her career taking down organized crime families. The evidence will show that Tobias Ellison operated a criminal enterprise designed to silence anyone who threatened his family's business interests. This enterprise included bribery, intimidation, and murder. The defendant used his wealth and political connections to corrupt local officials and cover up serious crimes. The key evidence came from an unexpected source: a hidden safe in Tobias's home office. During the search warrant execution following Raina's arrest, federal agents had discovered a false wall behind his desk. Inside the hidden compartment, they'd found cash, forged documents, and most damaging of all, a burner phone. Agent Mitchell held up the phone as she addressed the jury. On this phone, we found a video recorded by the defendant himself. A video that shows him and his wife discussing the disposal of an infant child. The courtroom darkened as the video played on a large screen mounted on the wall. The footage was grainy, obviously recorded in secret, but the voices were crystal clear. The video showed Tobias and Raina in what appeared to be a storage unit, surrounded by boxes and furniture. Raina was holding a baby carrier, but the angle made it impossible to see inside. Tobias's voice: "We can't keep the kid, Raina. She's too risky. What if she grows up and remembers something?" Raina's voice: "I know, but what do we do? We can't just kill a baby." Tobias's voice: "Storage unit on the south side. Anonymous tip to social services in a few days. By the time they find her, she'll be someone else's problem." Raina's voice: "What if she talks when she's older? What if she remembers us?" Tobias's voice: "Who's going to believe her? She's defective, Raina. Damaged goods from day one. Even if she remembers anything, who's going to care about the word of some foster kid against us?" The video continued for several more minutes. With both Tobias and Raina discussing how to dispose of the baby, they repeatedly called Cody's mistake and the problem. Cass felt sick listening to them talk about Annika like she was garbage to be thrown away. But he also felt a cold satisfaction. This video would put both of them away for the rest of their lives. "You'll notice," Agent Mitchell said as the video ended, "that the defendant refers to the child as defective and damaged goods. This language suggests a pattern of dehumanization that made it easier for him to justify abandoning an innocent child. The defense tried everything they could think of. They claimed the video was fake, that it had been manufactured by enemies of the Ellison family. They brought in expensive experts who testified about the possibility of digital manipulation, but digital forensics experts confirmed the video's authenticity. The metadata showed it had been recorded 6 years ago on the burner phone found in Tobias's safe. The voice analysis matched samples of both defendants speaking in court. More damaging testimony came from former employees of Ellison Industries, workers who'd been threatened or bribed to keep quiet about safety violations, environmental crimes, and labor law violations. A pattern of corruption that stretched back decades. The Ellison family has operated like a crime syndicate for years, Agent Mitchell testified. They used their wealth to buy silence, their connections to avoid prosecution, and their power to destroy anyone who threatened them. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Tobias Ellison was found guilty on all counts. He received 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, plus additional state charges that would likely keep him locked up for the rest of his life. Raina's sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge had reviewed her case in light of the new evidence from Tobias's trial. Mrs. Ellison, Judge Morrison said, "You have been convicted of some of the most heinous crimes this court has ever seen. You murdered your husband for money, abandoned your infant daughter to die, and spent 6 years living in luxury while that child suffered." Raina stood perfectly straight, showing no emotion. "The court sentences you to 18 years in state prison for the charges against you, plus additional federal time for civil rights violations. You will serve a minimum of 23 years before being eligible for parole." As Cass walked out of the courthouse, Janet Walsh caught up with him. "Justice served?" she asked. "Getting there," Cass said. "But it's not just about punishment. It's about making sure Annika is safe and that she knows the truth about what happened to her." Speaking of which, the custody hearing is scheduled for next week. Are you ready? I've been ready for 6 years. The custody hearing was held in a small family courtroom with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that buzzed softly overhead. Cass sat with his lawyer, a quiet woman named Margaret Stone who specialized in custody cases involving traumatized children. Judge Patricia Hoffman reviewed his petition for permanent guardianship of Annika, along with supporting documentation from social workers, psychologists, and medical professionals who'd been working with the girl. "Mr. Briggs," Judge Hoffman said, "the court has reviewed your petition and the extensive supporting documentation. The social worker's report indicates that Annika has been living with you for 8 months now, and that she's made remarkable progress." Cass thought about those 8 months. The nightmares that had gradually faded. The way Annika had learned to laugh again, to trust again, to believe that she was safe. She'd gained 15 pounds and grown 2 inches. Her hair was clean and shiny now, and her eyes had lost that haunted look. The psychological evaluation shows significant improvement in the child's emotional state, the judge continued. Dr. Martinez's medical reports indicate that her physical health has stabilized. Most importantly, it's clear that she has formed a strong, healthy attachment to you. "She's family, Your Honor," Cass said. "She's all I have left of my brother, and I'm all she is left of her father." The court recognizes the unique circumstances of this case. Given the clear evidence that you've provided a stable, loving home for this child, and considering the recommendation of all the professionals involved in her care, I'm granting your petition for permanent legal guardianship. Cass felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he'd been carrying for months. Annika was safe now. Legally, officially, permanently safe. No one could take her away from him ever again. That he drove home to the auto shop, where Annika was waiting in the upstairs apartment with Mrs. Patterson, an elderly neighbor who helped with childcare when Cass was in court. "How did it go?" Annika asked, looking up from a puzzle she was working on at the kitchen table. "You're stuck with me, kid. Forever and always." Annika smiled a real smile, bright and genuine. Nothing like the careful, frightened expression she'd worn when he first found her. "Good," she said. "I like it here. I like you." "I like you too," Cass said, ruffling her hair. "What do you say we go get some ice cream to celebrate? Can we get chocolate chip? We can get whatever you want." The next morning, Cass installed a new sign outside the shop. The old one had just said Briggs Auto Repair in faded black letters. The new one was bigger and brighter. Briggs Customs Rebuilt, not replaced. Word spread quickly through Scranton about what Cass had done. The local paper ran a feature story about the girl found in the dump and the man who'd fought to give her justice. Within a week, parents were bringing their troubled teenagers to the shop, asking if he could teach them to work on cars. Kids who'd been written off by the school system, labeled as hopeless by their families, dismissed by social workers who'd given up trying to help them. Cass started with 3 kids, then 5, then 10. He taught them to rebuild engines, weld metal, fix what was broken. But more than that, he taught them that everyone deserved a second chance. Doesn't matter what you've done or where you've been, he told them on their first day. What matters is what you do from here on out. You want to prove you're worth something? Show me. Annika helped sometimes handing tools to the older kids or sorting bolts by size. She was good with her hands, patient and precise. She reminded Cass of Cody at that age, curious about how things worked, determined to understand every part of every machine. One of the older kids, a 16-year-old named Tommy who'd been arrested 3 times for vandalism, asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up. A mechanic, Annika said without hesitation. Like Uncle Cass. Why? Because when something's broken, you don't throw it away. You fix it. One afternoon in late spring, as Cass was showing a 17-year-old how to rebuild a carburetor, a luxury car rolled slowly past the shop. It was a black Mercedes with tinted windows, the kind of car that screamed money and power. It stopped at the corner, the driver watching through the dark glass. Annika saw it too. She was helping sort screws by size, but her small hands went still when she noticed the car. She moved closer to Cass, her eyes never leaving the vehicle. "Uncle Cass," she said quietly. "What if they come back?" Cass looked down at her, then back at the car. He could see a figure behind the wheel, though the tinted windows made it impossible to identify who it was. The car sat there for a full minute, engine idling, before slowly driving away. Cass reached into his toolbox and pulled out a wrench, not one of the expensive precision tools, but an old, heavy wrench that could serve as a weapon if needed. He placed it in Annika's hands. "Then we show them what rebuilding really looks like," he said. The car didn't return, but Cass kept the wrench in Annika's toolbox from that day forward. That evening, after the shop was closed and the kids had gone home to their families, Cass and Annika sat on the fire escape outside their apartment. The lights of Scranton spread out below them, and for the first time in years, Cass felt something like peace. "Tell me about my dad," Annika said, the way she did most evenings now. Cass thought about how to answer. There was so much to tell, so many memories of Cody that he'd kept locked away since the funeral. He was stubborn, Cass said. Once he decided something was right, nothing could change his mind. He believed in fighting for what mattered, even when the odds were against him. Like he did for me. Yeah, like I did for you. He would have done the same thing, Annika. If he'd lived, he would have fought for you every single day. I'm glad he was stubborn. Me too, kid. Me too. In the distance, a siren wailed through the night. Somewhere in the city, someone else's life was falling apart. But here, in this small apartment above an auto shop, 2 people who'd been broken were learning how to be whole again. Cass thought about Raina, sitting in a prison cell 23 years away from freedom. He thought about Tobias, facing the rest of his life behind bars. He felt no satisfaction in their punishment, no sense of closure or peace. He'd never forgive them for what they'd done. Never forget the image of Annika eating moldy bread in a dump, thrown away like garbage by the people who should have protected her. The rage would always be there, cold and hard and permanent. But he didn't need forgiveness to move forward. He didn't need closure to build something good from the wreckage they'd left behind. "Uncle Cass," Annika said, her small voice cutting through his thoughts. "Yeah, when I grow up, I want to help kids like me. Kids who got thrown away. How do you want to help them? Show them they're not broken. Show them they can be fixed." Cass pulled her closer, feeling a fierce pride swell in his chest. This little girl who'd been abandoned and abused had somehow found the strength to think about helping others. She was going to be okay. More than okay. "I think that's a fine idea," he said. "Your dad would be proud. Are you proud?" Every single day, as the stars came out over Scranton, Cass made a silent promise to his brother. He'd raise this girl right. He'd teach her to be strong, to fight for what mattered, to never give up on people who'd been written off by the world, and he'd never let anyone hurt her again.